Welcome to Temple of the Mind. I'm your host, Caleb Monroe, and I want to thank you for stepping inside this sanctuary of thought, this sacred space where we gather to explore the minds that have shaped our world. This podcast is for the curious, the truth seekers, the ones who know there's more to life than noise and distraction. Here, we slow down, we reflect, we ask big questions. Each week, we'll journey into the life and legacy of one of history's greatest thinkers, philosophers, mystics, scientists, prophets, revolutionaries, the minds whose ideas still echo through time. From Socrates to Jung, from Simone Weil to Nietzsche, we won't just study what they thought, we'll try to understand why it matters, to them, to us, and to the age we're living in now. This is a new podcast, just beginning its life. It may be rough around the edges at times, but with your presence, your attention, your support, your mind, it will grow into something greater. If you believe in the power of ideas, if you've ever felt alone in your questioning, or overwhelmed by a culture that prizes certainty over truth, this is your refuge. I invite you to subscribe, to share, and to stay with us as we build a temple not out of stone, but out of words, wisdom, and wonder. In today's first episode, we begin with the one who never wrote a word, the man who walked the streets of Athens asking questions that still burn in our souls. Socrates. His paradox, his death, and the method of truth that would change philosophy forever. This is Temple of the Mind. Let the conversation begin. What if the wisest among us was the one who admitted he knew nothing? What if, in a world that rewards confidence and quick answers, real wisdom came from slowing down, asking questions, and being open to not knowing? This episode explores one of the most famous and puzzling ideas in the history of thought. Socrates' paradoxical claim, I know that I know nothing. But this isn't just about ancient philosophy. It's about how we live now. How do we navigate political arguments, social media outrage, workplace pressures, and personal relationships when everyone seems so certain and yet so divided? What if the path forward isn't in being more right, but in being more curious? We'll explore how Socratic thinking, humble, courageous, relentless, can help us ask better questions, find more meaningful answers, and live with greater integrity. From conversations with friends to decisions about our careers, Socrates offers a radically different approach to knowledge and life. So, what does it mean to live as if we truly don't know? And what might we discover if we try? They called him the wisest man in Athens. But when he heard this, he laughed. If I am wise, he said, it is only because I know that I do not know. This is the paradox. The one who denies knowledge is declared wisest of all. But how could that be? How could a man who admits ignorance be more awakened than the poets, the craftsmen, the politicians, all so sure of themselves? Socrates walked among them. He asked questions not with malice, but with a kind of quiet fire. What is justice? What is virtue? What is courage? And time after time the answers collapsed beneath the weight of their own contradiction. He never claimed to have the answers himself. He only watched as others unraveled. And in that unraveling, something was revealed. That certainty is often the veil that hides our blindness. His ignorance was not weakness, it was discipline, a way of being in the world, alert, honest, open to the unknown. What if this, too, is wisdom? Not knowledge as possession, but wisdom as presence. The capacity to dwell in the question, to endure the silence that follows when all false knowledge falls away. Socrates did not teach answers. He taught how to live inside the ache of not knowing. And that is why he was feared. Not because he destroyed what others believed, but because he revealed how fragile belief can be. The paradox of Socrates is not a riddle to solve. It is a mirror. What we see in it depends on how ready we are to be unmasked. If you look closely at the foundations of the modern world, how we learn, how we argue, how we question what we're told, you'll find the quiet, persistent presence of Socrates. A man with no books, no temple, no followers in his lifetime, and yet here we are, still speaking his name. Socrates didn't leave us a system, he left us a way of thinking, and in doing so, he shaped the world more deeply than kings or conquerors ever could. Let's begin with his method, questioning. What's often called the Socratic method, asking clear, sharp questions to test assumptions, isn't just for philosophy classes. It's the foundation of critical thinking, something we depend on in journalism, science, law, and education. His way of thinking taught us not to accept things at face value, but to dig, to test, to ask, is this really true? Socrates believed that knowledge wasn't about repeating facts, but about awakening the mind. He didn't see the teacher as someone who fills students with knowledge, but as someone who helps bring out the knowledge already within them, like a midwife helping with a birth. This is still how the best education works today. Socratic seminars, discussion-based learning, and open dialogue are direct descendants of his way of teaching. But Socrates wasn't just a thinker. He was a moral example. He lived by what he believed. He once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living," and when the city of Athens put him on trial, accused him of corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods, he didn't back down. He chose death over dishonesty. He could have escaped. His friends offered him a way out, but he stayed. He drank the poison. Why? Because to betray his principles would have meant losing something even more precious than his life, his soul. This moment, this simple, devastating act of integrity, echoes through history. Socrates became a symbol of standing up for truth, even when it's unpopular, even when it's dangerous. Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and many others would walk the same path. Peaceful resistance grounded in deep moral conviction. That's a Socratic legacy. Politically, Socrates raises tough questions. He wasn't a fan of mob rule. He questioned whether the majority was always right, but he also challenged the idea that those in power should be above criticism. He believed that every citizen had a duty to examine the laws, not blindly follow them. This balance between respect for the law and the courage to question it is the foundation of modern democracy. It's what makes free speech possible. It's what makes dissent valuable. Socratic practice isn't just public, it's interior. In our private lives, we often live by inherited habits and quiet assumptions. This is just the way things are. I need to succeed to matter. I can't change. But Socrates says, examine them. Ask where they come from. Hold them up to the light. The unexamined life is not worth living for a human being, he says during his trial. That statement wasn't philosophical flourish. It was existential urgency. In practical terms, this might look like journaling, therapy, meditation, or simply honest self-inquiry. Asking, is the life I'm building actually mine? Are my values lived or just spoken? Socratic wisdom doesn't give you a script, it gives you a mirror. Finally, there's courage. Because this way of life isn't easy. It will cost you certainty. It may even cost you popularity, but it will give you clarity and integrity. And that, Socrates believed, was the soul's true wealth. I am not going to alter my conduct, he told his judges, not even if I have to die 100 deaths. He chose the examined life, even when it cost him everything. In today's world of fast takes and shallow wins, that kind of clarity is revolutionary. In work, in politics, in love, and in ourselves. What would it mean to stop pretending we know, and instead start asking, what is really true? That's not a rhetorical question. It's an invitation. And it just might be the beginning of wisdom. Socratic wisdom doesn't stay locked in the academy. It walks with you. It sits beside you in board meetings, joins you at dinner tables, and whispers questions in the quiet moments between decisions. Socrates never wrote a word, and yet he's still speaking. Because what he taught wasn't content, it was a posture, a way of being in the world. And nowhere is this more urgently needed than in the messiness of real life. In modern workplaces, especially those driven by performance and optics, the pressure to appear competent can outweigh the desire to be thoughtful. Managers speak with certainty, employees fear asking obvious questions, but Socrates would have seen this as a dangerous illusion. He who knows not, and knows not that he knows not, is a fool. Shun him. The problem isn't ignorance, it's hidden ignorance, the assumption of knowledge without the courage to examine it. A Socratic workplace is one where people feel safe admitting what they don't know, where the boss says, "Let's explore that further," instead of defaulting to policy. Where strategy meetings are driven not by ego, but by thoughtful elenchus, the method of questioning designed to draw out contradictions and sharpen understanding. This doesn't mean paralysis, it means precision. As Socrates puts it in Plato's Apology, I do not think I know what I do not know. That humility is the foundation of better leadership. Now consider politics. We live in a culture that often rewards certainty, outrage, and division. Socrates was deeply suspicious of such public performance. He distrusted the demagogues of Athens and believed that the unexamined slogan was the enemy of justice. His method wasn't partisan, it was purifying. If I say that it is impossible for a better man to be harmed by a worse, he declared, you will not believe me. He held that true harm came not from opponents or critics, but from moral corruption and self-deception. Imagine bringing that into today's debates. Not aligning with a party to win, but asking, what are we assuming here? What is justice really demanding of us? Socratic political action begins with inner clarity and results in public courage. It's not the loudest voice in the room, it's the one that speaks last, after deep listening. In the final years of his life, Socrates found himself increasingly at odds with the city he loved. Athens had been shaken by war, humbled by defeat, and left uncertain of its values. The old ways were crumbling. The democracy, once proud, now saw threats everywhere, including in the quiet figure who wandered the streets asking uncomfortable questions. His relentless questioning had made enemies among the powerful. He exposed the false wisdom of politicians, the hollow certainties of the elite, the shallow rhetoric of the city's influencers. To those invested in authority without accountability, Socrates was dangerous. He was charged with corrupting the youth and impiety, accusations vague enough to condemn a man for being inconvenient. During his trial, he could have begged for mercy. He could have softened his tone, offered appeasement. Instead, he stood firm, resolute. I will not cease to practice philosophy, he said, even if it costs me my life. And it did. Sentenced to death by a narrow vote, he refused the opportunity to escape. He would not betray the laws he had lived by, nor the truth he had pursued his entire life. His death was not an act of surrender. It was the final proof of his integrity. Socrates chose to die as he had lived, honestly, courageously, and without compromise. Today, in a world saturated with information, divided by opinion, and obsessed with certainty, Socrates' paradox may be more relevant than ever. But what does it really mean? And how can it guide the lives of ordinary people trying to navigate a complex and often overwhelming world? Socratic ignorance is not about knowing nothing. It's about being aware of the limits of what one knows. Socrates knew that most people overestimated their knowledge, and that this illusion was more dangerous than ignorance itself. His statement, "I know that I know nothing," is not an admission of defeat. It is a declaration of intellectual humility. It is a refusal to pretend, to posture, or to claim wisdom one does not possess. This humility is radical. It means living without the armor of easy answers. It means being willing to say, "I don't know," not as a weakness, but as an opening to learn, to dialogue, to change. Thanks for stepping inside Temple of the Mind. If something you heard today sparked a thought, stirred a question, or helped you see the world a little differently, consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing this episode with someone you think might appreciate it. Your support means more than you know. Truly. I'm Caleb Monroe, and this is just the beginning. Until next time on Temple of the Mind, stay curious, stay honest, and keep asking the big questions.